Hello, Najla.
Hi, Lori. How are you?
Good. It's great to see you.
Great to see you
It's been
too.
so
How have you been?
long. Great. How about you?
I'm doing well, thank you.
You look
Got my
awesome.
thanks. I got my shots, so I
Good.
started living again.
Good. Yeah, isn't that the truth? I
Yeah,
know. Yeah, I'm waiting in line. I'll let everybody that needs them before I go. But
yeah.
hopefully in the
Yeah,
next
probably in the next month, everybody would be able to get them.
Yeah. Did you have any side effects?
With the second one, I was kind of tired for a few hours, but the
Yeah.
next day, but it
Yes.
wasn't anything to complain about, really. I didn't
Good.
have a fever or chills or
Good.
anything. I just
Cool.
felt like I've been hit by a Mack truck, so I laid
Yeah.
around, loafed around for a few hours, and then I was fine.
Good. Good. That's great to hear.
Yep.
There's Mr. Gavin.
Hi, Lori Dilks.
Hi, how are you? I
I'm
had to
good.
replace your sign today because the wind just like,
Yeah, you're not the first person to say that,
whew.
including my wife. The wind was a bit rough.
Yeah, it was very rough. It just, yeah, tore it to smithereens, but I got it back up. I just put two up at the intersection at the school. So that's a great intersection.
Cool.
So yeah, I'll probably be stopping by for some more now that hopefully we're done with this crap weather for a while.
I suppose in time we will find out.
Yeah, very true.
So you're working in your office, Lori.
I am.
Cool.
Yep. Are
So
your clients going to be with you or how are you doing it?
they're going to be on Zoom.
Okay, great.
I hope.
Great. Okay.
Strange things are known to happen sometimes.
Yeah. Not with Zoom. Of course not with Zoom.
Did you do the one we had in Bern a few weeks ago?
No, but you told me all about it. You
Yeah,
said
that
it
was-
was a nightmare.
It kind of was. There were a lot of
Yeah.
people trying to talk on top of each other.
Yeah, we can't have that in Zoom. We can't have that live, but we really can't have that in Zooms.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Plus it was difficult to talk to my own client.
Yeah, you said that.
Yeah.
Yeah, everybody has to just breathe, let a second in before the next, or else the transmission just is a mumbo jumbo and it's bad.
I actually,
Hello, David. How are you?
I'm well. How are you guys?
Good to see you.
I hear you, but I don't see you.
Yeah,
He's
I don't
there.
see him either. Where is he?
You can't see on the right. Don't you
I don't
see
even
him?
have a box for him.
Yeah.
No, I do.
There he
Here
is.
he is. Here he is.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
We
Hi,
found
Dave.
him.
I saw Najla. Oh, there's Dan coming alive. Oh, there's Najla. Hey, how are you?
I'm good. How about you?
I'm alive, well, and vaccinated. So that
That's
seems to be
great.
the good.
Did
the good
did
thing.
Joanne get vaccinated too?
Yep. She's
Oh,
got-
good, wonderful. Yeah, I'm vaccinated too.
Yeah, we're all so old. It was easy.
Yeah.
Uh, the advantages.
Yeah. There are a few of them,
Not
Lori.
many.
Trust me, there are very few. Jim, are you handling things this afternoon?
So they tell me.
So they. Okay.
Yeah,
the
Mike
big
had to be
cheese.
someplace else. So yes, it's me.
You're the big
I
cheese.
every time I drive out my driveway, there's these big signs that say Gavin all over it.
I don't know anything about that. And in some cases, Dave, I actually may not know anything about it. I go driving down streets or walking down streets and I see those signs and I'm like, whose house is that?
Well, since Heidi lives at the end of my driveway, it's pretty easy.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's easy to figure out where hers are.
Yeah. Mr. Becker, how are you?
Doing well, thank you. How are you guys doing?
Where is
Hi,
he? I don't see
Dan.
him. Dan, I don't see you. Where are you?
I'm on
Right
there,
th-
someplace.
He's there. Yeah.
He's on the Star Trek deck.
That's right, exactly.
Hi, Michelle.
Hi,
How are you?
I don't see anybody. How do I
Michelle.
increase?
it's a beautiful day outside. We should be
Hey.
outside, not
Yes.
in our virtual world.
There's nothing stopping you from doing this on
Okay.
your back deck.
That is true. Besides the wind and my barking dog.
Yeah, the wind would make it just a bit uncomfortable today, although last week it was perfect.
Yeah, it was. More of that in our future, hopefully.
Hello, everybody.
Hi, Bob.
Hey, Bob.
Bob.
Owen.
Bob,
Robert.
how are you?
Hello.
Hello, I could see me. I can see Jim. How are you?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. David, how in the heck are you?
I'm good, thank you. Good to see you.
And
I see
Michelle, how's
Mr.
my,
White relaxed back there in the corner someplace. Chip, how are you?
Good. How you guys doing?
hey, Chip. And Michelle, how are you? My
Good,
favorite
and
zoning,
yourself?
my favorite zoning officer. And well, actually, I understand they're gonna be renaming Wyomissing after you because you're doing all the things.
I hope not. Bob, I saw you walking out of Do-si-Do last week and I was gonna honk at you, but I didn't want to startle you.
Was it walking okay?
You were walking fine.
Yeah, it was
was
before
8
noon, Bob. For
Yeah, it was
you
8
know.
a.m. Bob.
Oh, okay. Was that Lori? I saw, was Lori there?
Hi.
Hi, Lori, how are you?
Yes. How are you? Good to
I'm
see
good.
you.
Nice to you too.
Yeah. Tell
Love this
Lisa I
age of
said
COVID.
hello.
Pardon me?
Tell Lisa I said hello. I haven't seen her in
I will.
ages. All right.
I will do that. And Dan, how you doing?
Doing well, thanks, Bob.
I think I got everybody, didn't I?
I
Because
see we have somebody joined us here by telephone. Do we know who that person is yet?
Yeah, Mike Setley. If I'm
Mike
not muted
Setley.
here.
Hi, Mike.
Hi, Mike.
Hi, Dan. Hello, everyone.
Hey, Mike.
I'm actually in my car because I made the mistake of driving to Borough Hall. Now I'm realizing this is Zoom only.
That was their aunt.
Okay. I guess we pretty much have all the actors, don't we?
I believe we do.
Laura, are you ready to go?
Yeah, I'm just noting. Let me just note one more person.
So they like all like at home or whatever?
Is,
Sam,
It's
you
not-
taking your jacket?
is Najla here or is it just David and me?
Yeah.
No,
No,
Najla's
she's
here.
Oh, hi, Najla. How are you?
Najla's-
I didn't see. There we go. Let me just.
You need to enlarge your screen.
Yeah, that's what I'm gonna do. Where the hell does it do that?
In the top right corner.
No, I thought it was too late. A little smoke. I've never seen it.
They'd be back at the hot tubs.
Let's try this one. I have it at standard.
Do they,
No, that didn't work.
Bob, if you go up to the top right, if you're on a Microsoft machine computer,
Yeah,
it should say view.
yes, I have it there. Yes, and
And
it
if
says
you click
standard
on-
side by side or side by side gallery.
You go to gallery, that way you'll get everybody.
I think I did.
There you go.
Yes, okay. Thanks.
Where is that for the gallery?
If you're on a Microsoft computer, it's top right. There's usually a little clock that's ticking and then to the right of that, it says view. It looks like a,
I have view options on mine.
yep. Okay, if you click on that, it should say in there, it should give you a couple different options.
Yeah,
Okay.
it doesn't say anything about, oh, it says
Gallery?
maybe side by side mode would do it. Oh, there, I get it. Yeah, okay, now I got it. Now I got it. Okay, shall we go?
Yes, sir.
All right, let's call the meeting of the Wyomissing Zoning Hearing Board to order. We are here today for the application for a request for a variance and a modification to a previously granted variance from the Borough of Wyomissing zoning ordinance. Normally, I would read into the record the entire piece that has all of the zoning conditions and all of that sort of stuff, but you all really do not want to listen to me read for 15 minutes, considering all of the issues that are here. So I'm going to assume this is entered into the record anyway as a part of the zoning application. Is that okay, Dan?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and that way we can proceed with the hearing. At this point, Dan, I guess you should explain how we're going to handle everything today.
Sure. Before I do that, Mr. Chairman, do you want to introduce the board members?
Well, of course, we all have pictures and names, but I'll do it anyway. Najla Batish is a member of the board. Bob Ullman is a member of the board, and I'm David Rothwell, and I'm the chairman of the board.
Okay. So
and counsel is Dan Becker. I'm sorry, I forgot him.
That's all right. So just to go over briefly how the hearing will proceed today, because this meeting is being conducted by Zoom, first and foremost, I'm going to ask that everybody who's not speaking, that you please mute your microphone so we don't have feedback from and just other interference during the testimony and the comments that will be presented today. If you don't mute yourself, at some point I will ask Melissa to mute everybody. So just be aware of that. When you're talking, you will have to unmute yourself to talk. Today, we're here to hear the application that's been filed on behalf of, I just want to get the name correct. I believe at this point it's the Works at Wyomissing. And as the chairman mentioned a moment ago, there is a number of documents that will be entered into the record later that were submitted as part of the application with the relief that's being requested. It's my understanding that we have today Jim Gavin here representing the applicant, and I believe that Chip White is here and Frank Watts are here as I'm looking at the screen on behalf of the applicant, and I assume will be providing testimony today. I know that you folks, the three of you, have all been here before this zoning hearing bill before, so you know generally how we operate. We're going to operate, even though it's by Zoom, it's going to be operated in the same manner. It's your burden of proof. You have the opportunity to present evidence today, both documentary and through testimony from witnesses. At the conclusion of each witness's testimony, the board members and other members of the public who may be interested parties will have the opportunity to ask questions as well. After all the testimony is presented, if there is any other parties of interest, and we'll talk about that just briefly in a moment, they will also have the opportunity to present evidence and witnesses as we proceed. After all the testimony has been entered, the zoning hearing board will go into an executive session to deliberate on the information that's provided. Typically, we render an oral decision the same day. If not, we do have 45 days in which to render our written decision. Is there any questions about how we're going to proceed today?
No.
Okay. I also understand that Mr. Setley, you're here this afternoon as well. Who are you representing a party, Mike?
The Metropolitan LLC, a neighboring property owner.
Do you plan on, are you asking for party status?
We are, but as long as I'm asking, I'd also like to go on the record that we requested a continuance because of the unavailability of the Metropolitan LLC's regular counsel. And I'd like to renew that request to the board. Ms. Plank is not available, did not have ample time to get the expert that she would have put on. I do understand that the borough followed all the notice rules, and I'm not arguing with that. We were just asking as a courtesy for a continuance so that we can put on our best case in opposition of the variance.
Certainly, and Mike, so you're not making any suggestion then, to make sure I'm clear, that that you didn't have the required notice under the statutory requirements for zoning hearing. Is that correct?
No, Mr. Becker, I believe we did. I believe we got all the required notice.
Okay. And I know that there was a request that was made. I think I saw it from my perspective, saw it first on, I think it was Friday of last week. And I responded to Ms. Plank because we have certain requirements and deadlines by which we're required to proceed, that she would have to discuss that with the applicant. Has she done that? Did she request the applicant to agree to an extension or continuance?
She did, and the applicant declined to do so.
Okay, Mr. Gavin, has that position changed, or are you willing to continue the hearing today?
That position has not changed. I do not have the authority to consent to a continuance.
Okay. So to the board members, we at this point, we can still discuss, if you'd like to, whether or not you want to grant an extension or continuance. The continuance is being proposed by the applicant. We've met our statutory authority. If you'd like to take some action on that, you still can. Otherwise, I recommend that we proceed, as scheduled.
Mr. Becker, just to correct you, you said the continuance was requested by the applicant.
I'm sorry, by the adjoining property owner. Thank you, Mr. Gavin.
Thank you, sir.
Unless there's a contrary opinion from my fellow board members, I think that we're in a position where we should proceed. Robert?
Well, I appreciate you considering it.
Oh,
Okay,
I'm stuck on this one.
you're stuck?
I'm stuck on this one. What are the, what do you and you, Dave, is your position to proceed?
Yes.
And Najla?
Proceed.
Well, then. Okay.
Okay, then having cleared that, we should proceed.
So
Dan, are you-
why don't we just do it in the form of a motion to,
Okay.
that we would deny the request for a continuance.
All right, I make a motion that we deny the request for continuance.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, Mr. Setley, the motion has been denied, the continuance has been denied. At this point, I believe we're ready to proceed, Mr. Chairman, if you'd like to turn it over to the applicant to begin their presentation.
I would, and I would like to make a request of the applicant that is not normally necessary, but considering all of the issues that and the several pages of things that we're going to go through, Mr. Gavin, are you in a position where you could summarize or maybe make an opening statement that would position this for us so we know where you are and where you're going and what you hope to accomplish here today?
I can, and I appreciate the
that.
opportunity.
Okay.
Although the documentation that's before you is fairly lengthy, I think the issues before you today are actually relatively minor in the greater scheme of things. I think the documents before you were designed in part by us, but also in part by the borough zoning officer to give the board a history of this property and the history of the various zoning applications that have come in before the board over time. This board's very familiar with this property. I've actually been in front of the board on this property myself on at least one or two occasions in the past. It's the Works in Wyomissing, which is a condo unit. And the issues before you today are, one, a use issue for a laser tag, which my client had actually gotten approval from the board in the past, and for one reason or another did not move ahead with the completion of it. And they're going to be asking for that approval again. That issue has modified just a tad because the township changed the zoning ordinance very, very recently. So that's why we need a variance for the use. The other issue that's before you today and has been a challenge for this property for years upon years, and that is parking. And that's where the zoning officer, Michelle Bear, comes into play. And honestly, to her credit, Michelle notified the condo owners recently that they just can't move on the way they're doing it, where every couple of years somebody comes in and they say, hey, I need so many spaces, and the board's approving so many spaces, but really, you know, nothing's clear as to who has what spaces or whatever. So Michelle basically told the owners that she wasn't going to be recommending any such zoning relief unless the condo units got together and came up with a plan that assigned so many parking spaces to each condo unit. So that has been accomplished. There is an agreement. The agreement is being circulated right now for signatures. So ultimately, what we would be asking the board to do is to grant the relief that we're requesting, and to condition it upon us providing the signed documentation to the township, the borough zoning officer. I can tell you in a few weeks, I will be before you again on this same property, but for a different condominium owner, again, for a use issue and the parking issue. But that's really what's before you today, is the use and the parking. And again, I anticipate before we're all done, Michelle will be able to give you her view on everything. But I mean, I think that sums it up. We're coming before you for reviews for the laser tag. The baseball that was in the initial application, that has not come to fruition just yet. So we're not proceeding on that issue today. We may need to come back in the future, but we're not proceeding on that today.
So that issue has been withdrawn then from your application, Mr. Gavin?
Yes, and Mr. White, that's correct.
Yes.
Yeah, that's
Before
withdrawn.
before we provide any testimony from Mr. White, we want to make sure that he's sworn in.
Yes.
So why don't we do that right now? Just swear in the witnesses that you're going to be having testify today.
Yeah, we'll have Mr. White and Mr. Watts sworn in.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, just a second, please. All right, gentlemen.
Excuse me, Laurie, swear in Michelle at the same time, please.
I will, absolutely. Okay. I'd like to raise your right hands, please. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give today will be true and correct to the best of your ability?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So Mr. White, just to confirm the statement that you just provided, that now that you're under oath, the application, that part of the application relating to Evolution Baseball has been withdrawn. Is that correct?
Yes.
Thank you. Please proceed.
And
Mr. Gavin.
that's withdrawn without prejudice, Mr. Becker, because it may
Understood.
come back.
Understood.
So unless
proceed,
the
Mr.
board has anything else from me on the opening statement, or Michelle, is there anything you would want to add at this point?
No, I'm fine with letting you have your clients go through their testimony and then fill in or add as necessary.
Thank you, ma'am.
I do have a question. If the Evolution Baseball portion of this is out, then what other issues under the zoning issues of the memo dated March 16th, 2021 have to be addressed?
There's the use for the laser tag, Mr. Ullman.
Okay, that would be two. Number two, the zoning issue. Oh, I'm sorry,
Correct.
number three. Two's
Yes.
out, three's in. Okay,
Right, and then the parking variance for the off-street parking.
okay. How about five? That's a variance from section 609.
That's the off-street parking.
Yeah, there was a previous request that provided for indoor parking, and it's my understanding Mr. White does not need to provide that any longer. Is that correct, Mr. White?
We don't want to provide that. That's correct.
Right.
Is
The
that
park-
off then? Is that off then?
No, that's still on, Bob. We
That's
still
on.
have-
Okay, all right.
Yep.
How about number six?
Number 6 would be parking for the Evolution Baseball, and we're not proceeding on that today.
Right. And the rest are on, right?
Yes. Well, 7 relates to what I discussed about the communications from Ms. Bear.
Right.
to the various owners. 8 outlines the parking and 9 outlines the occupancy.
Thank you. I'm sorry for interrupting. I know I interrupted. I'm sorry.
No need to apologize. Shall I proceed with Mr. White?
Yes, please, let's move ahead.
Thank you. All right. Mr. White, you have been sworn in and you've been before this board in the past, so they all know you, but could you state your full name for the record, please?
William F. White.
Okay, and Mr. White, what is your relationship to the applicant that works at Wyomissing LLC?
I'm the owner and president.
To give the board an update since the last time that you were before the board, can you tell the board what is going on at the property at this time?
I don't remember the exact date I was before the board, but I think what we talked about was doing indoor parking in the back section of the building here. And that was pre-COVID, so things have changed since that time for our business.
Okay. And do you want to do the indoor parking anymore?
You know, at the time pre-COVID, it was something that we were willing to do. I didn't feel that it was necessary, but we thought to just sort of appease the neighbors and appease everybody that we'd be willing to do it. And I think post-COVID, with restrictions on our business and financially things being a lot different than they were a year ago, it's something that we don't think makes sense like it did a year ago for us. Nor do we see it as something that's necessary.
Now, for the purposes of today, we're going to be talking about the laser tag. Is that in a specific condominium unit?
Well, that would be within the Works restaurant. So what we're proposing to do would be remove about half of our dining room seating, more than that, and replacing it with a laser tag facility.
Now, I believe at some point in the past, you were before the board on hatchet throwing. I'm assuming that's moved ahead and is in place. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yes, that opened, I want to say November prior to COVID, so November 9th, 2019.
And at that time, you had also asked for permission for the laser tag and it was permitted. And I believe that was pursuant to a written decision dated March 19th, 2019. However, in the meantime, the laser tag was not installed. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. And the approval that existed at that time has expired.
Yes.
Okay. And do you want to proceed with the laser tag now, sir?
Yeah, we think for our business, it makes a lot of sense to proceed with that new business.
Okay. And where, I think you said that'd be located inside the Works restaurant?
Yeah, so what we would do, we'd eliminate about 150 seats in the Works restaurant and replace that area with a laser tag facility that would hold about 40 people. So it would reduce the number of people in the building, I believe.
Okay. And you've retained the services of Mr. Watts to describe the construction and parking issues in detail to the extent necessary for the board. Is that right?
Yes, that's right.
Okay. So let's move on now,
Excuse
Mr.
me,
White.
Jim, just one quick question for a matter of clarification. This has nothing to do with the old Laser Quest that was in another building.
It is a laser tag facility, but it has no connection to that. No, it's a separate and distinct business, and it's a little bit different from that business as well. That business closed, I think, in June of last year.
Okay. Just because it says Laser Quest on the map, and I want to make sure that nobody's confused by it.
Oh yeah,
What do you
yeah. No,
mean?
that's been empty for a while.
Okay.
May I proceed, sir?
Yes, please. I'm sorry.
Oh, no need to apologize. All right, Mr. White, I want to move on to talk about the parking at the property. you obviously have been before this board several times in the past and would agree that the parking has been a challenge. Is that right?
I think that meeting the zoning, the ordinance requirements has been a challenge. Yes. I don't know from a practical standpoint that we've had a lot of parking issues in terms of too many people. I mean, our parking lot gets busy, that happens, but from a practical standpoint, it hasn't, I don't know that people have been parking on the street or neighboring properties as a result of that.
Fair enough. The challenge has been meeting the zoning ordinance. There have not been
Right.
times where you haven't had parking for the people that wanted to use the property. Is that fair to say?
For the most part, yeah, that's fair to say.
But nonetheless, we've recently been contacted by the borough zoning officer who wanted to address this issue by the condominium unit owners reaching an agreement. Is that right?
That's right. Yes.
Can you explain to the board what the nature of the agreement is going to be?
So the agreement, there are different businesses within the complex that have different parking needs, and the agreement is intended to allocate the parking to those businesses, and it looks at the times when all these different businesses require parking. Some require parking during the day, some require parking at night and primarily on weekends, which would be our business. So it seeks to sort of allocate the parking and do it to all the different businesses. So there's a clearer picture of who has what and when it's used by all the different businesses here.
And was a parking matrix created?
Yes, it was.
And was that submitted to the borough as part of the zoning application in this case?
Yes.
And is that part of the package that was given to the board?
Yes.
As you sit here today, sir, are all of the condominium owners in agreement with this parking matrix?
Yes.
Now, it's my understanding a written agreement has been prepared. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And it is being circulated for signatures at this time.
Yes.
And I will start that again. At this moment, as we sit here a little bit after 3 on Tuesday afternoon, have all the signatures been obtained yet?
No.
Okay. Are you, in the event the board were to grant the relief that you are requesting today, would you be agreeable to a condition that provides that you may not implement the relief granted until such time as you produce a signed fully executed copy of the agreement for the borough zoning officer?
Yes, I'd be willing to do that.
Let me close out your testimony with just some general questions under the zoning ordinance. Based upon your familiarity with the property as a whole and the uses that exist there and the use that you're proposing, do you believe it will adversely affect the character of the general neighborhood?
No, I don't believe that.
Do you believe it will adversely impact the conservation of property values?
No.
Do you believe it will adversely impact the health and safety of residents or workers on adjacent properties and in the general neighborhood?
No, I don't.
And do you believe it will adversely impact the reasonable use of the neighboring properties?
No.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. White. I don't have any other questions at this time.
Do any of the board members have any questions for Mr. White? I guess silence means no.
I don't, because I wanted to be a gentleman and ask Najla if she did first.
No, I don't.
All right.
I try. I don't necessarily succeed, but I try.
Before we proceed, though,
Thanks, by the way.
Mr. Rothermel, I do have a few questions, if I may.
Yes, Dan.
All right, Mr. White, we referenced the matrix, the parking matrix and agreement. Does the borough have a copy of that agreement currently?
I don't believe they have the actual agreement, no, but they have a copy of the matrix, the picture, if you will.
So the matrix is the document that was part of the application. Is that correct?
Yes.
All right, what I'd like to do, I have a feeling that we're going to be talking about that in a little further length here as we move forward. So I'd like to mark that as applicant's exhibit number 1, so it's easier to reference as we proceed. So has the borough approved that parking matrix? Do you know? Have they give the borough council itself, not the zoning hearing board, but borough council, have they reviewed it and given any comments on it?
Have they reviewed the diagram that shows the parking?
If I may, Mr. Becker.
Yeah.
It has been submitted to the township zoning officer. The parking is all on private property. Other than the zoning board, I'm not quite sure what borough council position would be on the subject, whether it would have any position.
Okay. So my question is, are you aware, has borough council provided any comment on the parking in this location?
I have no reason to believe it has.
Okay, how about Mr. White?
Yeah, I'm not aware of that either.
All right. Now, to you, Mr. Gavin, are you going to take us through this parking matrix in detail?
Mr. Watts is going to talk about the number of spaces. In answer to your question, no, I wasn't going to go through it in detail. The key is really what spaces are assigned to this particular use and why a variance would be needed under that circumstance.
Okay, I think we're going to need to understand, at least I'm going to need to understand, is when I'm preparing a decision as to how that matrix plays out for the various uses. Now, I can certainly take it directly from the matrix, but understanding the timing and so forth, I want to be very clear about what those, the different days, the times, the number of spaces that are going to be allocated to the various uses. And I want to try to understand how that applies back into the prior zoning relief that was granted, including, as you pointed out during your opening and questions by Mr. Allman, that Mr. White now wants to eliminate those, I think it was 80 some spaces that were reserved for potential parking in the indoor parking. So I want to understand how that eliminating that requirement impacts the overall application and what's being proposed over there. So are you going to be able to provide testimony with that with Mr. Watt, or is that something that we need to question Mr. White about?
I think that's some of those questions are better directed to Mr. Watts, but I would note that on the matrix, there is a box entitled Parking Distribution Matrix for WIP Complex, which goes through the number of the condo units, the owner, the square footage, and the spaces associated with them.
Okay. Thank you.
And the one thing I would say, Mr. Becker, because you had asked about the prior decisions, somewhat with the exception of the indoor parking, it is my understanding that it is both the party's desire and the borough's desire to try to move on from the prior decisions and have the creation of this agreement between the parties to be a new starting day, because what was happening was zoning decisions were referring to prior zoning decisions on top of each other, and it was just getting too complex.
Oh, I understand that. I understand that completely.
Yeah, well, you were the one writing the decision.
Yeah, and I appreciate the fact that we're going through this exercise, but I want to make sure that that it's clearly stated on the record as to how that is going to be, changing and modifying what was previously in place.
Okay.
Is that it, Dan?
Yes, sir.
Appropriate at this time to Mr. Setley to ask questions?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Yeah, I just have a few, if I may. Mr. White, as somebody who lives walking distance from your complex, I believe it's been growing and improving over the years. Is that your view of it?
I would say, 2019 was probably our best year. And then in March, middle of March, we closed the facility down. based upon the governor's order for 3 months, and then probably lost about 45% of our sales as a result. So I would say it was growing through 2019, and it was doing very well through the first 2 months of 2020. And since then has literally kind of been a disaster financially and operationally. You know, we put a lot of time into this business trying to make sure that it stayed open, that it stayed healthy. And right now we're still trying to recover. So I would say, no, we're not anywhere near where we were over a year ago.
But for the pandemic, it's been a successful business and a successful complex.
I think that I would say there are a lot of challenges as a result of the COVID epidemic. It's changed how restaurants do business. It's reduced the financial stability of restaurants. So I would say no. I don't think I'm not going to go on a limb and say that yeah, this is going to be our best year ever. I think there are a lot of challenges, and I think one of the reasons we're here before the board is because we're trying to minimize, to reduce our exposure to the food and beverage side of things and go into something different like laser tag. So there are a lot of challenges this year. You know, we're working with less staff, just a multitude of issues.
But you've been there a long time. How many years have you been there?
Well, so we're there 19 years.
And you're still standing. I guess what I'm getting to is
I'm not dead yet.
One at a time, please. One at a time, please.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Is the relief you're requesting in order to open a laser tag necessary for the economic viability of the complex and your business?
I think so, yes. Yeah, I mean, there are parts of this business right now that literally aren't open. I can't open them because some of them have, people in close quarters. And I've got parts of this business that are closed. So yeah, we're in a position right now where we've got to do whatever we've got to do to get this place back on track. And that's what we're trying to do here.
Moving on, is there any other way to achieve more parking and minimize the variance being requested?
I mean, there are parking garages. The parking in the back could be done. I don't know that the parking in the back building in building 22 though was ever something that we're actually going to use. It was more done because every time we come in for a variance or we want to change something, we're being asked to provide more parking. And when we were having a great year, spending some money to fix up the back building for parking that we wouldn't use wasn't that big of an issue to us. Now it is. I mean, we've got to retool the business. We're going to spend $800,000 on the laser tag facility, and we've got to be smart how we spend money. So I look at it like, to stay healthy, it's something we need to do. And I think we don't need parking. I mean, this particular activity is going to be less intensive than the current dining that we have there. We're getting rid of 150 dining room seats and putting in something that has 40 people in it. So I think, on top of the fact that we've closed the nightclub business that we had that would sometimes draw over 1,000 people, I mean, our parking needs have gone down, if anything.
And I understand your position and opinion on that, but nonetheless, you still need a variance from parking because you don't meet the zoning ordinance, correct?
Well, anytime we change any use in here, we have to come in for variances, yeah.
Did you ever take any action that eliminated parking spaces available to you?
Yes.
What was that action?
Well, the Metropolitan Apartments parking, we did lease that, and I felt that it was no longer necessary, so I discontinued that lease.
Thank you. That's all I have.
May I ask a
Okay.
question?
I'm sorry?
May I ask a question?
Yeah, sure, Bob.
Michael, what is your client's position relative to the relief requested here?
Well, my client's position is that it doesn't meet the standards for unnecessary hardship that would allow a variance. The business isn't failing. The applicant actually abandoned parking that was available to it by terminating a lease. And there's an ability to provide additional parking as evidenced by the 80 indoor space proposal that now doesn't want to go forward. All of those things say, I don't have an unnecessary hardship under the standards, legal standards for it. If the borough wants to do a text amendment to the zoning ordinance, so that Mr. White doesn't have to go through this all the time, there's not much we can say about that. They could choose to change the parking requirements. They haven't. This simply doesn't meet the requirements of an unnecessary hardship. I mean, I think the very fact that Mr. White's business is still open 19 years later is good evidence of that.
Okay, may I ask, and you don't have to answer it, but what is the impact that your client will experience? Is there any negative impact that your client would experience by any decision we make here?
Customers continue to use the parking area that Mr. White abandoned. I mean, to the point that the barricades had to be installed.
All right, well, now that the barricades are up, is there any negative ramification to your client's property as a result of any decision we make?
As a
Here's the
result
part-
of what, Bob, I'm sorry, as a result of what?
Of any decision we may make for on the relief that's being requested?
Other than just a crowded parking situation within eye shot of the apartment he's trying to rent out.
So Bob and Mike, before we go too far down this road, while I appreciate the questions, Bob, and I think they're good questions, if that's the position of the neighboring property owner, they're going to have to provide their evidence and testimony of that under oath as well. So I think, I saw that Kevin Timonchenko is here on the call. So at some point they'll have their opportunity to provide that evidence. Well, I'm fine for the offer of proof that's being provided. I think we need to proceed with the evidence that we're trying to elicit right now through these witnesses.
I agree, Mr. Becker.
Okay, gentlemen, then let's do that.
So I guess we're still on Mr. White. If there's any other cross-examination for Mr. White or questions for Mr. White.
I have nothing further.
Okay, Mr. Gavin.
I have no other questions of Mr. White. I'm prepared to call Mr. Watts at this time.
Then let's do that.
Mr. Watts, are you still with us?
Yes.
Excellent. You have already been sworn, sir, but I'd ask you to state your name again for the record, please.
My name is Frank Watts.
And Mr. Watts, what do you do for a living?
I am an architect, registered architect in the state of Pennsylvania. I work with my own firm, DTS&J Architects, and I'm also a construction manager for Berkey Construction.
Okay. And have you been engaged by Mr. White to help him with the development of the property that's at issue today?
I have been under DTS&J Architects, yes.
Okay. And have you come here today to discuss the work you've done, your opinions and conclusions, and the relief being sought?
Yes, I have.
Let's just generally review your qualifications, if we can, sir, your education, license, professional experience, those types of things.
Sure. I went to Philadelphia University, took a 5-year bachelor degree for architecture. I did my internships and all the accreditations, got my licensing in the early 2000s, and have been a registered architect in the state of Pennsylvania ever since. I'm also a standing member of the National Council of Architectural Registration Boards and the IEBC, or IBC, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, national what?
The National Council Architectural Registration Board is just a standing member there, as well as the IBC, International Building Council.
I'd offer Mr. Watts as an expert in the field of architecture for the purposes of today's hearing.
Any objection from the board members?
No.
Mr. Setley.
Mr. Sedley? Guess not.
Hearing none. Yep, hearing none. Okay, I think then we would accept him, Mr. Watts, as an expert in matters of architecture.
Thank you, sir. All right, Mr. Watts, can you tell the board what the property is that is the subject of today's application?
Yes, today we're talking mainly about the Works restaurant in this particular case, but I was approached to also just address the parking matrix with the entire Wyomissing industrial complex.
Okay. What zoning district is this property in currently?
My understanding, just based on the history, that it was located in the C1 neighborhood commercial district, and believe it also overlapped into the I2 industrial district, but more recently with some of the changes is now located in the C2 retail commercial district.
And how large is the overall property, sir?
To be honest with you, that's one I did not get a chance to confirm. We've got several acres there. I did not do a confirmation on that square footage just because of the parking allocation situation.
And what's currently located on the property?
So there are several buildings, some of which are connected, some that are freestanding, and there are a number of there's certainly multiple condo owners over there, but you've got currently Gold's Gym. There is Mr. Romig owns Building 25. He's got several tenants in there, including I believe the Army recruiting folks, or the Marines. I'm sorry. There was a tanning salon there. Just multiple tenants. Chima, they're located behind the Works, and then there's Gold's Gym, which actually I think just recently changed their name to, I think it's PA Fitness or something similar to that.
In terms of the use that Mr. White is proposing, will anything in terms of the overall structures be removed from the property?
Not in this particular approach, no. There would just be modifications inside the existing condo unit number 6.
Okay, or any other buildings being added to the property?
No.
So let's move on to the renovations to condo unit number 6. Can you describe for the board that building that's going to be modified?
Sure. What we refer to condo unit 6 is really what we all know as the Works restaurant. Behind in the rear building, he has the arcade. The front building, which is where the main entrance is located, that has from when the restaurant opened back in the early 2000s, that was what we came to know as the Works restaurant. Since then, to the left of that is where Building 24 is located, and that will remain unchanged. When you come in the front entrance through the lobby there and meet with the hostess, there's an area located right behind the hostess. There was a fountain there at one point, a large gear. And right behind there is some raised seating areas, and that is the location where the laser tag area is being proposed.
And how is that going to impact the occupancy of that use, sir?
So we're basically at this time assuming that there will be approximately 150 seats that are lost with the renovations. And so, that'll be obviously the platforms will remain, the new construction will be constructed on top of that. But the loose tables, seats, booths, those will all have to be removed in order to make way for this new attraction.
Okay. And when you say 150 seats lost, is a better way to say that is that's going to reduce the occupancy by 150 approximately.
That's correct.
Okay. Now, in terms of the overall shape of the property, do you think you and I can agree that that property is irregularly shaped?
Very much so, yes.
Okay, and how does one access and leave that property?
So right now there are a couple entrances onto the property. The primary entrance for the works is right off of Bern Road across from the post office. And there is another access point, and I apologize because I'm not sure what the name of that street is, but there is a street that runs between Metropolitan Apartments, the Viva complex, and takes you to the rear of the property. And currently that is only really accessed by the works staff. That is not promoted as an area for public access. It is not gated, but it's not promoted as that for any of the tenants or customers. So the primary customer would enter off of Bern Road onto the main parking lot.
Okay, and there appears to be another entrance across the street from Russo's.
Yes, I believe there's actually two entrances off of that little wing of Bern Road across from Russo's. And those are primarily used by Russo's customers, probably some by Gold's Gym, and then also Chima, their employees.
And are those entrances or exits being changed in any way?
No, sir.
Okay, and are they generally deemed to be appropriate and safe, sir?
Yes, sir.
Okay. With the change in use at this property, do you anticipate any significant changes in traffic to the property?
No, sir. I mean, we would actually expect the traffic flow to be reduced at certain times just because of eliminating that 150 seat area within the restaurant. And obviously that's impacted the most, during those peak hours on the evenings, weekends. So we would anticipate that to go down slightly. And enough to obviously, we can't seat people if the seats aren't there. So they do have a maximum occupant load that they have to hold.
Now, sir, I was going to say here, but you were online when we were discussing the agreement that's being reached between the condo unit owners regarding the parking matrix for the property. Is that correct? And have you reviewed the parking matrix?
I actually prepared that parking matrix.
Okay, and can you discuss the parking matrix with the board and explain it to them, please?
Sure. And I'll preface this with, this is information that has really been presented to the board in the past. There has really not been a whole lot that has changed other than the fact that we took the time to clean it up and try to simplify it a little bit. The premise has always been a shared use of the lot based on the different tenants and the needs of the condo owners. And so we've always identified what we would consider to be the peak operating hours of those various users and how that compared to the peak hours of the works. And they've always been very complementary of each other, which is why we believe there has not been an issue for parking over the years. Because during the daytime hours in the week, those other occupants are utilizing the parking lot. Most of them tend to clear out in the evening hours, which is when the peak operating hours of the works kick in, and of course on the weekends. And so over the years, those users have changed, the tenants have changed, and so simply we just took the latest information and the history on those buildings and their occupant needs, their parking needs, and have summarized that with this matrix.
Okay. So are you able to describe for the board, using the matrix itself, the number of parking spaces that are designated for the various condo units, and explain the matrix?
Yes.
To the board in detail.
Yeah, so in the bottom right, I'm not sure who has control over the drawing there, if they would be able to pan down to the bottom right corner. Basically, what we've done here is associate the total number of parking spaces that are available within the Wyomissing Industrial Park, and this does not include the indoor spaces that we felt prior were really not necessary, but were agreed to at that time. It also does not include a portion of the parking lot that we kind of call Russo's parking. While that is a parking area that is associated with the Wyomissing Industrial Park, there is an agreement to allow them to continue using that space for their needs. So not including the Russo lot, there are a total of 463 spaces available. And then basically for condo unit number 1 for the works, we did not allocate any spaces for that because that all falls into condo unit number 6. Condo unit number 2, which is building 25, that's about approximately 31,306 square feet. They basically need 162 spaces during their peak hours during the day, but they would only be allotted 20 spaces during the peak hours of the works. And that is really when they're shut down or just have minimal staff needs at that time. Condo unit 3A, which is the Gold's Gym portion, there are 63 spaces allocated. They only need 50 based on their current occupant load. Again, during the peak hours of the works, they would have 26 spaces allotted to them. Condo unit number 4, which is Chima, they have 45 spaces. They only need 10 to serve their needs. And again, 0 spaces would be available to them during peak, as that would be considered overflow parking for the works during their peak hours. Condo unit number 5, Chima, again, no allocation of spaces there. We rolled that into condo unit number 4. And then condo unit number 6, the works, during their non-peak hours, they would still have 193 spaces allocated to them. They need 454 spaces at peak. And that is with the current seating as it is. That's not taking the, the adjustments here for the laser tag into account. But 454 spaces, there would be 417 spaces available to them during their peak. So you can see there that they would fall short by approximately 40 spaces. However, they do have miscellaneous agreements with Russo's and with that with another neighboring property to exceed that 454 spaces that are required to them.
Is there anything else the board needs to know about this, about the parking matrix, sir?
The only other thing that I would comment on is to the left there. There would be the operating hours of those other uses, and that's how we determine what their peak hours are versus and how that compares to the works. And so we've identified their hours of operation.
So we want to look at right now the left-hand side of the matrix that's been marked as applicant's exhibit number 1. Is that right?
That's correct. And so you have your existing hours of operation, which identify those other users. And then the existing parking distribution above, it just kind of explains what I just went through on the matrix over to the right, but just provides some colored areas for clarity on the drawing.
Okay. Anything else the board should know about the parking matrix, Mr. Watts?
No, I don't believe so. Again, I think this was mentioned before, but the point of this was to make sure that all the condo owners were in agreement with this understanding, and that, I believe to provide some clarity, we were identifying what spaces they need, for their, during their daily operations, so that there was a little bit more clarity to the borough in that sense. But.
Okay. So moving on from the matrix itself, Mr. Watt, I want to talk generally about the zoning standards. Do you believe that the use and the proposed parking will adversely affect the character of the neighborhood?
No, I do not.
Given the proposed layout of the property in relation to access streets, do you believe that there would be undue congestion or hazards prejudicial to the general neighborhood as a result of pedestrian or vehicular traffic to and from the property?
No, I do not.
Okay. Generally, in terms of the laser tag, are services and utilities available to properly serve the property?
There are, yes.
Okay. And do you believe that this has been designed to promote the public welfare, safety, and general welfare of the community?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So let's move on to the variances that are requested today. The first is the variance for the use under section 502. Explain again to the board what the relief is that's being sought.
I believe, they're really the two main things are we have to seek relief for the authorization for the laser tag just because of its use. And that's been very typical of any other use that we've had to present to the board in the past. Anytime there's been a change, we've had to ask for relief from that. But it is in harmony with the other operations of the works.
And in this case, the laser tag was actually approved before. The thing that brings us before the board is the zoning ordinance change.
It was a zoning ordinance change, and the original location was in the back building, so that testimony would have to be updated as well. We are now taking away seats where that was not the case the first time around.
And then the second variance is under section 609, which is for the off-street parking. And can you explain to the board what the ordinance requires and what's being asked for?
Yeah, the current zoning ordinance does tend to associate square footage with parking spaces, which is it's a very odd pairing when you have these former industrial buildings that are just massive in square footage. You have something similar like the go-kart area that has a very limited occupancy, but just requires a lot of square footage in order for it to operate. And that's really been the premise from the very beginning when we came to the board back in the early 2000s for the original relief. We asked for that time for there to be parking calculation based on the actual occupant load of the buildings versus the square footage of those buildings. And that testimony has remained consistent over the years with every change that has taken place over there. The occupant load of the works complex remains at 1,300 occupants total. And so we believe that parking calculation would still apply. We've utilized the 1 in 3 parking calculation, which is how we get to the 454, including staff as well.
And then again, how many are being provided pursuant to the matrix?
With what we have right now, they would be required to have 454 spaces available for the works during their peak operating hours.
But I think you said the matrix provides 417, is that right?
I'm sorry. Yeah, I stand corrected. 417 spaces, and then the works does have separate arrangements to pick up the remaining spaces.
And are these issues being driven by the size and shape of the property, sir?
Yes, very much so. I mean, the shape of the property does make it very difficult. Obviously, the more you can get rectangular spaces in there, it creates a number of issues along the back and the side property, primarily over near Chima and Russo's. And so, there's been a lot of thought given into how this parking can be expanded, but there's really not a whole lot of options over there on this existing property.
Okay. Is there anything else, Mr. Watts, that you think this board should know about this application today?
No, again, I think it should stand to, be understood that even though the Chima spaces are available to the works through their agreement with that and through the condo matrix, they have not needed to utilize that parking to this point. And so that space is certainly an area that they could continue to flow into if they needed to.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Watts. I don't have any other questions for today.
Are there any
Mr.
questions?
Gath,
Yes, sir.
before you proceed, are you going to have another witness to testify about the elimination of the parking requirement that currently exists for the 80 indoor spaces?
Mr. Watts, can you address that issue?
Sure.
The elimination of the parking.
Yes. So I believe approximately a year ago when we came before the board at that time to, to seek relief for parking, that was something that was requested of us to provide indoor parking that allowed up to, I believe, 80 parking spaces. I do need to let me just confirm that. I apologize. I don't have that exact number in front of me. There was a certain number of parking spaces that we were requested to provide internally. And that is, while it's feasible and certainly something that Mr. White was willing to do to accommodate the request of the board, it is it is an expensive venture. It does take up a good amount of space. It's certainly not an ideal location for parking. There is a hardship in having to create, the proper ventilation systems in order to make that happen. It would be utilized for staff, but it is certainly not an ideal situation. It's a very tight entrance to get into that building. And so we believe that would actually create more hazards, in order to provide a space like that. And just historically, we've never needed those additional spaces. And now with the pandemic, don't believe there would be any reason to need those indoor spaces.
And because of that, Mr. Watts, the applicant is requesting that that provision be modified and be removed. Is that right?
That's correct, yes.
Anything further on that, Dan?
No, not at this time.
Okay.
I mean, if Mr. Gavin's satisfied with that testimony, it's fine. There may be
Yes.
some cross-examine on it, but that's fine for right now.
Are there questions from the board?
No.
I don't know what happened to Bob. He disappeared out of the picture. But I do have a question because I'm not sure that it was explained or I may have missed it or I just don't understand it. This needs 454 at peak. Can you explain to me where that number comes from and what it means?
Yeah, so the 454 parking spaces, that comes with the current occupant load of the building at 1,300 individuals. When you divide that by 3 and then add your staffing requirements into it, so basically taking the intent of the zoning board, which is often, or the zoning ordinance, rather, where it assigns parking to the number of seats in a restaurant or an amusement area. And so that parking calculation came based on the occupant load. The zoning ordinance actually calls for the use of square footage to determine parking spaces, which we felt has never been applicable to this use. And that's the same testimony that we had given, in prior, presentations to the board and when the works was originally presented to the borough back in the early 2000s.
Just glad you didn't expect me to remember that.
I'm lucky if I remember that.
Well, Mr. Watts, if that's the case, so does the zoning, are you telling me the zoning ordinance right now requires you to look at it on a square foot basis or a combination of square foot and seats and other occupancies?
So because it's a former industrial space, there are certain uses over here that have to rely on square footage to determine number of parking spaces. Because this is a restaurant, because it's an amusement, because it's not one of the current allowed uses, that's why those variances had to be acquired to even allow this use to be placed on this property. And so, because of that, and because there was a tangible number of occupants that were limited to the building, the parking was established based on the occupant load in previous decisions.
No, I understand that part, but I guess my question maybe more directly is based upon the new zoning ordinance.
Yes.
And I think this may be the first time we're looking at this project under the new zoning ordinance. Is that correct, Michelle? Or have we looked under C2 before, under the C2 before?
I'm going to apologize in advance for my dog barking. So because this property has, excuse me, multiple different uses, some, like Frank said, some industrial, some restaurant, some retail, some service, I actually broke down every tenant space and went through the zoning ordinance requirements for off-street parking. Restaurants based off of seating and employees. Something like Gold's Gym is based off of square footage available to patrons. Something like Chima is either based off of square footage, 1 space per 1,000 square feet, or number of employees on the shift of greatest employment. So it really just depends which space you're talking about, what the parking requirement is.
So then, and maybe this is best for Michelle, so thank you, Michelle, it was very helpful. So the 454, that's based upon the current zoning ordinance that's in place. That's the number of spaces that are required for.
No. If you look at my memo, which is page 3 of the documents Melissa has up on the screen, if you look at number 8,
Yep.
the current required number of parking spaces based off the zoning ordinance is 1,926 spaces, which when we got to the point of my testimony, I was going to explain why that is a ridiculously inflated number.
Okay, so the 1,926 spaces, what I'm trying to do here is, because we're changing the way we've analyzed this before. And we're trying to put together a matrix. So I need to understand from what number we're requesting relief.
1,926.
Right, so not 554, we're requesting relief from the 1926 number, because that's what's
Correct.
required under the ordinance.
Correct. And if you take into account the laser tag attraction, removing 150 seats in the dining area, the 1,926 spaces gets further reduced to 1,879.
Right,
You look
I
at
see that,
number
down to
9.
number 9, right, down to
Yes.
number 9, okay. All right. All right, and the 554 number is coming based upon a more realistic review. Michelle, just correct me if I'm wrong in my understanding, but a more realistic review based upon the uses that are currently at the property.
That number, correct. I mean, that number is coming off of Frank looking at the individual uses, looking at the occupant load, coming out of the IBC, the International Building Code, and how the tenant spaces are actually being used, the number of people that are actually there during their peak hours of operation.
Mr. Watts, is that correct? Is that how you arrived at those numbers?
That is correct.
Okay. All right. I'm sorry, Mr. Rothenberg. I just wanted to get that clarified so I understood for sure what we were looking at.
Well, I want to ask another question, clarification. The 1,300 that we set for occupancy was based on the old uses. Is that still an accurate number?
Yes, that is, and that was based on a variance that was generated by the state back in the 2000s. That determination went to Pennsylvania Labor and Industry, and then the borough accepted that occupancy limitation as well when we went through the building permit process at that time. And so those building uses, the laser tag, it falls under the category of an amusement, which is in line with the other attractions that are within that property.
And then the question in my mind is 1,300 an occupancy that is reached or certainly not exceeded legally, but reached often?
It has not been, and Chip would be better to address this. There were times in the past where they had concerts and different functions in Building 24 that they would approach that number. But they have, again, shifted their business strategy to do other types of attractions that don't bring out the same number of people. So, the ability to hit that 13 occupant load has significantly been reduced, which is why he's pursuing the laser tag attraction and willing to give up those seats.
Do you have a mechanism in place that actually counts occupancy?
We did have a counting system years ago that we tried to use, but it was difficult with so many different entrances and exits, and when you have multiple people leaving, it wasn't counting accurately. So it just never gave us anything worthwhile. We're actually better off just walking through the building and getting 5 people and having each person count a designated area. And that's actually much more accurate. And we've done that a few times. And like Frank said, we hosted Jazz Fest a few years ago, and when we would do those events and the works aside from that event was full, yeah, we would be 1,300. We might go over, we might be slightly under, but we're not doing those events anymore. The nightclub used to draw a lot of people. We're not doing that anymore. And we're downsizing dining room because we feel like the food business is not something we want to do more of necessarily after last year. So I think the business is changing. I think it's becoming less intense. And I see parking needs going down, if anything. I don't see them going up.
Okay. Any other questions from the board? Dan?
Let me take a look at my notes just for one moment, please. Yes, where you had talked, Frank, about the Russo's parking. Can we go back to Michelle to the matrix again? And my copy is kind of small, so I'm trying to understand where that is located. Where is the Russo's parking that you had mentioned?
That would be the area shaded in green, 29 total spaces.
And that's not part of your count for the total spaces of the 463?
It is not. And the reason for that, this is a very strange parcel of land. It is part of the Wyomissing industrial complex, but they have some form of a lease when the Russo building was sold off by a previous owner. They had some type of an agreement to utilize that area right there for their customer parking. And I believe it was something like 99 years and then another 99 years. It was something that was pretty interesting. So they have the right to those spaces, but then they also have given permission for the works to use that when they're not open. And so that becomes one of the overflow spots, but we could not count that in the matrix for the Wyomissing Industrial Park because Russo's has the right to use those parking spaces during the day when they're open.
Are they used in your count when you get to the 417 spaces?
No, they would be in addition to that.
And Frank, is that also true of the Chima spaces?
No, because Chima is part of the condo association, so the Chima numbers are considered in the parking matrix.
Okay, all right.
Okay. I think that's all I have at this time, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Sadley?
Yes, very briefly. I just want to make sure, because I'm not able to see it. Is the parking matrix just a calculation of the spaces you believe to be available, or is it a restrictive covenant among the condo owners?
I'm not sure if I understand what you're asking. The matrix was.
Is it just your calculation of the parking you think is required, or will it become part of some sort of condominium association document where they agree to abide by it?
Yeah, so this has become part of that document that is currently being circulated. They have all agreed to it. We are just waiting for the signatures to come back on that document, but this matrix is included in that document.
How at all is it to be policed? If I say I only need 15 spaces during the day, but I use 20, who's the wiser?
Again, that I believe would be something. There is some verbiage in the agreement for them to be able to utilize those spaces. I'm not as familiar with that document because I know there have been attorneys that have been drafting that up and referencing this document. But that is the intention, and part of it is to allow those buildings to be able to operate as they need to during the day. I believe they would have a conversation with each other and work that out.
Very good. That's all I have.
Okay, Mr. Gavin?
I have no further questions of Mr. Watts, and I have no further witnesses for today.
Michelle, is there anything you wish to add at this point?
Oh, where would you like me to start? So I want to give the board some background on this. It was mentioned in my memo, but to kind of bring you up to speed, what's happened between 2019 and now. In 2019, we had the hearing where you approved the laser quest, you approved the axe throwing, and Frank and Chip are correct. There was testimony about the indoor spaces, and you again left the determination up to me as the zoning officer to pull the trigger when those spaces were going to be required. At the same time, the lease agreement with the neighboring property owner for the use of approximately 93 parking spaces went away. I had to issue zoning violation notices, which are part of the exhibit package that you all received in advance of today's hearing. I had to issue zoning hearing board, or I'm sorry, zoning ordinance violation notices to Gary Romig and Chip White that they were in violation of exhibits and testimony they had presented to the board for prior relief that was granted for parking. One of the options that Chip had to cure his violation was to construct 80 indoor parking spaces. There was a letter that I issued to Chip dated February, hold on one second, I'm scrolling through all of my exhibits, February 13th of 2020, that said the zoning violation was withdrawn as long as he would construct a minimum of 80 off-street parking spaces to be located in building 19 and 21, as shown on the conceptual floor plan that Frank Watts prepared dated February 8th of 2020. On March 17th, 2020, I received a building permit for the construction of those 80 indoor parking spaces. As you are all well aware, literally a week later, it hit, everything was shut down. Chip reached out to me, I'm gonna say May, maybe June of 2020, just, saying, hey, obviously we put this project on hold. At that point, he could not open under any capacity. We were still in phase red of the governor's reopening plan. So we agreed to touch base, later throughout the summer. And I also agreed to give him an extension of time to create those indoor parking spaces, knowing that, construction came to a halt. There were a whole host of other things going on because of COVID. So just to be clear on those indoor spaces, that was a requirement. And if you agree to grant the relief, that's, or at least a portion of the relief that's being requested today, that is to clear up that also that zoning violation and cure from early 2020 that those parking spaces must be put in. So that's part one. Part two is.
Wait, Michelle, before you go on to part two, so if we do not require those spaces, then you have to proceed with the notice of violation that currently has been issued?
I have withdrawn that violation notice when the building permit was submitted for the construction of those indoor parking spaces last year. So Chip is now saying he does not want to create those parking spaces. So yes, if the board denies that request, I would have to issue a new zoning violation. That they are still in violation of prior relief that was granted by the board.
But if the board grants the relief that they're requesting now, does that, in your opinion, does that not cure all those prior violations?
Yes, agree 100%.
Okay, I'm sorry, Michelle. Go on to number two.
That's okay.
Oh, excuse me for 1 second. Before we go on to number two, I just want to make sure that everybody understands we do have a hard stop at 4:30 today. I believe Michelle has another commitment. Actually, Michelle and Melissa have another commitment. So we have about another 10 minutes, and then we're going to have to look at some future dates. Michelle, will you be able to do that here fairly quickly with number two, or should we just take the break now and start establishing dates to move forward?
I think I can do number two fairly quickly.
Okay, please proceed.
So January 25th of 2021, I issued a letter that was also part of your packet to all three condo owners, Store Masters Funding, Gary Romig, and Chima, indicating that in the weeks prior, I had had multiple conversations with interested parties that either wanted to lease or purchase portions of the Wyomissing Industrial Park property. My concern was that every one of those interested parties would need zoning relief and be coming before the board piecemeal. So I issued a letter to the three condo owners basically stating you need to come together to create a parking matrix, which was what we discussed previously at today's hearing, and a recorded agreement amongst the condo owners spelling out whom has the right to what on the site based off of uses and provide the borough a copy of that. That letter also stated that I would not be in a position to recommend the board grant any kind of relief if that matrix and agreement were not presented. My concern was that you were going to be hearing different requests from different applicants in a vacuum without knowing what else was potentially intended to be operating on the site. And as you are aware from my emails from last week, we have 2 hearings scheduled for May 5th for 2 other uses that the applicants would like to operate from the overall industrial park property outside of Chip's request today. So again, those letters were included as part of the information you received in advance of today's hearing. I just wanted to I wanted you to understand, the board, why those letters were issued and why the matrix and the agreement were important to me and also the applicant coming into today's hearing.
So Michelle, just quickly then, are those other hearings that are coming up on May 5th, those 2 uses, they're not included in this matrix at all currently?
They are, in that the spaces are called out. One is 1041 Bern Road. The other is the Gold's Gym space.
So there's parking already attributed to those to some degree?
Correct. And actually both of the new uses would be less intensive in terms of parking needs.
Okay, I understand. All right. All right. At this point, Michelle, do you have anything else? And you may have more, and I know there's things that I want to go through with you at some point on the administrative side, but is there anything more that you have this afternoon that you would want to present right now?
No, everything else can wait.
And I'm sure that both Mr. Gavin and Mr. Setley have questions for Michelle, but because of the hour, it's 4:24 right now, and I know we have to wrap this up. I'd like to do is just put your questions on hold for right now. You can resume those questions once we reconvene at a future date. At this point in time, what I'd like to do is see if we can find a date.
Mr. Becker, will Metropolitan have the opportunity to present evidence at that time?
Oh, absolutely. No, absolutely. No, Mike, absolutely. In fact, I think we wanted to get, I think Mr. Rothermel wanted to get some clarification just to put in perspective kind of what was going on and what the testimony was by the other 2 witnesses. And at this point, we now have that, I think, in context. So you will absolutely have the opportunity to present your witnesses at the next hearing.
Thank you.
Okay. So for those who are here and participating as parties, I'd like to just talk about getting some dates together that we can talk about so we can announce the new time on the record, so we do not have to then go back and re-advertise again. Michelle, have you looked at or thought about any future dates?
I was looking as early as next week. Melissa and I are both available the 7th and 8th. The week after that, I would say the 14th or 15th.
Let's just start with the 7th and the 8th. Actually, both days look fairly clear for me.
I'm not available the 7th or 8th.
Okay, then we're going to look at something else then. Let's move on to the following week. How about the following week, Michelle?
The 14th or 15th.
I'm good on both those.
I'm available on the 14th, but not on the 15th.
All right, so we have the 14th. Let me ask you this question. Mr. Setley, how long do you think you'll need to present your testimony?
Half an hour to 45 minutes tops.
Okay. Mr. Gavin, do you anticipate any further witnesses?
I do not.
All right. All right, so if we did something, how about the board members? Are you available on the 14th at, let's say, 3 o'clock?
Yes,
Yes.
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 Okay, perfect. Michelle, you can reserve the the Zoom for us, the Zoom link for us?
Mr. Becker, may I ask my clients, Mr. White,
Oh,
Mr.
absolutely.
Watts, are you available on the 14th?
Yeah, I'm available.
I'm available as well.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Okay.
probably the most important person. Melissa, are you available on the 14th?
Yes, I'm available. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Melissa. All right, Lori, and you're available too, I assume.
We'll get coverage for you.
Great, thank you.
I don't know yet, but
Okay, so then, since we're approaching the 4:30 stop time frame, what we'd like to do then is put on the record that this hearing will go into recess until 3 p.m. on Wednesday, April 14th. And it will also be done by Zoom. Michelle, how will you issue the link for everybody for the Zoom?
Melissa, we can't use the same one, can we?
No, we won't be able to. It'll delete itself.
Okay, we can issue a new one for both the public meeting and the executive session. Public meeting, we can post on the website, as well as I believe I have contact information for everybody that's participating. We can also send it out via email.
Okay, if you say you have emails for everybody who's here right now, it looks like there's 14 participants.
I'm just gonna do a roll call to make sure I have everybody. Mr. Jadek?
Yes, I'm here. Thank you. I was muted.
Kevin, I'm assuming that's Kevin Timochenko.
Yes.
Michelle Ferrand, I have yours. Obviously, Bob, Chip, David, Najla, Melissa, Mike, I have yours. Mr. Gavin, Lori, Dan, myself, and then Frank. So yes, I have contact information, email. I can send it out to everybody.
Probably want to include Nicole on that too, since I know she was interested in attending, so.
Yes, thank you.
Yep. All right, so at this point in time, we just need a motion to recess the hearing to Wednesday, April 14th at 3 p.m. on Zoom.
Make a motion that we recess until 3 p.m. on the 14th. Second,
I'll second it.
is that sufficient?
Aye.
Aye. There we go. We got
All right.
three ayes. Yeah, okay.
Perfect.
All right, Robert.
Thank you very much. Now, the board members, if we could just go into our executive session just for a few minutes, just want to talk about procedural matters moving forward. So at this
I'll get off
point, the meeting is recessed until the 14th, and the board members, I'll see you in the executive session.
Okay.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Right.
Yep, thank you. Goodbye now.